Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart, and today I'll be breaking down the Thursday night football game for week 2. We have the Eagles versus the Vikings. Going to be a great game. Hopefully, it's a lot better than last year when they matched up. But yeah, I'll be breaking this down, going over my favorite picks, building a lineup for you guys, going over all the key information you guys need to have a successful night tomorrow and get that cash, potentially take down that $1,000,000 at first. So hit that like button and subscribe. Let's get into it, boys. So one thing I always do before I look at building a lineup is look at the spread and game total. So you can see 6.5 point favorite to the Eagles. Not huge, but still, getting up there in terms of spread in the NFL. And then game total 49, so it should be a very high scoring game according to Vegas. So with that in mind, let's build around that. In terms of news, there's no big news there on the Minnesota side besides the fact that I do think they lost another lineman. So it's going to be interesting when it comes to running the ball with Minnesota. They were terrible last week. They might be even worse this week, losing another lineman, having to call someone up. So keep that in mind for Minnesota. No huge injuries to any of the main players, but they do have some O-line troubles right now. And then on the Philadelphia side, right now, Kenneth Gainwell has been ruled out. So we just finally got that news there. So we'll talk about the implications of that. So moving on to the Minnesota side, we'll start with the price tags just for everyone in the flex. So starting off with the Minnesota side, we'll go to the snap count by team. So we're going to Minnesota. For the running back situation, Madison played about 73% of the snaps. And then CJ Ham, Ty Chandler kind of split a little bit of the backup work there. Wide receiver room, Justin Jefferson, clear number one, as we know. And a lot of people will find this surprising, but KJ Osborne played 58 snaps, equals 91% of the total snaps there for the Vikings offense. So he's the clear number 2 wide receiver in terms of just plays out there. But obviously, Jordan Addison was a little bit more productive than him in that last game for the first game of the season. As you can see, Addison was obviously the clear wide receiver 3. They didn't play anyone else. It was just those main 3 guys. Moving on to the tight end situation, TJ Hawkinson, 75% of the plays. Oliver and Mont kind of split the backup work there. So when we go to team targets, we'll pull that up as well. We can see for the running backs, Madison got 4 total targets. CJ Ham also got 3 targets as well. Ty Chandler. So they are throwing it down, dumping it down to the running backs. Looking at Justin Jefferson, 12 targets. Addison, 6. KJ Osborne, 6. So they did get even targets, even though Osborne did play a lot more snaps compared to Addison. And then for the tight end situation, Hawkinson got 9 targets, and then Oliver got 3. So with that in mind, let's jump into this Minnesota side. So for the Minnesota side, obviously Justin Jefferson is going to be the clear option here at 12.4K. Going to be a very chalky captain play. Going to be a very chalky flex play. It's one of those things where you can make the argument to fade him. We know Philadelphia is a great defense. Their front 7 are fantastic. Excuse me, the front 4, front 5, fantastic. Their linebackers are solid. Their secondary pretty solid. They do play some zone, so they can give up some good amount of yards. But once again, I do think they'll be focused on Justin Jefferson. Even then, it's very hard to stop him. I mean, obviously Tampa Bay focused on him, and he's still 1 for 9 for 150. Kirk Cousins is going to throw him the ball 10 plus times unless they completely take him out of the game. But yeah, I mean, Justin Jefferson, I just think with how popular he's going to be, it really comes down to ownership for me if I'm going to put him in the captain or flex spot. I might get risky and fade him in a few lineups, but if you're making multiple lineups, you're obviously going to want him in a bunch. If you're making just one and you're trying to take down this $1,000,000 to first, you can make the argument to not play him in the captain spot and not play him at all. Obviously, it's a huge, huge risk and gamble, but there is that way where he can go out there and have an average game and he can get outscored by anyone else. So always keep that in the back of your mind. You don't have to play him, even though he is the best wide receiver in the game right now and goes absolutely off. But yeah, I don't mind him. I just prefer going a few different ways than Justin Jefferson as of right now. That may change. Kirk Cousins, if you're going to play him in the captain spot, you're going to want to pair him up with at least 2, if not 3 people in the flex there, because it makes sense. Why? Because, if Kirk Cousins is going to be the optimal captain, that means he's absolutely going off. He's a quarterback who can't run like Jalen Hurts, so you're going to have to pair him up with some of his pass catchers. So you can always get different and go with a running back because he will dump it off to Madison. Madison could potentially have a good game as well as Kirk Cousins, but yeah, you're going to want to pair him up with, at least 2, if not 3 of his pass catchers. So like a TJ Hawkinson, like an Addison, and like Osborne, Justin Jefferson. And then the next guy you could pair him with, if it's not going to be the running back, is the kickers. Kickers do pair well with quarterbacks at captain, so you can definitely go that route there. Um, he does have a pretty solid ceiling. It's hard to put him in the captain and not expect Justin Jefferson to have a really good game. They're almost hand in hand. But if he's in the captain, as I said, at least two of his pass catchers in the flex spot there. Because if Kirk Cousins goes off for 350 yards, 3 or 4 touchdowns, that could be spread out to multiple receivers, and you're going to want them in the flex. In terms of other guys here on the Minnesota side, Madison, 11.4K. I do think he'll be pretty low owned coming off a very terrible game there. 11 for 34 yards. He did see 4 targets, as we mentioned, caught 3 for 10 yards, did get a touchdown there. So that really saved his fantasy points. But otherwise, it was not a very productive day going against a tough Philadelphia defense. So I expect a lot of people to jump off of Madison, especially with the news that Kenneth Gainwell's out. People are going to, transfer all that ownership to DeAndre Swift, those backup running backs. So I do think a lot of people won't be playing Madison. For that reason, I do like him. I like playing contrarian. If he's going to be pretty low owned there at 7.6K, I think he has enough upside in the captain spot, but I do think I prefer him in the flex spot just because, he should get 10 plus target or 10 plus rushing attempts, and he should get a few targets out of the backfield as well. So that means he does have the upside there to be an optimal captain, but I think I prefer him as a flex play right now, depending on ownership. Hawkinson, probably my favorite captain play right now. Saw 9 targets, did not go for a ton of yards, as you can see, only 35. His long was 14. But it's just the fact that he's targeting him a ton. He's been very, very involved at the end of last year into the start of this year. Kind of wish those depths of targets would be up there, but still, a guy who's going to see probably close to 10 targets, if not more, has that red zone, share. He gets looks in the red zone. Really, really like TJ Hawkinson is my main captain play right now from the Minnesota side. Jordan Addison, I think he's a fine play. It really comes down to ownership. If people are going to flock to him over KJ Osborne, or if people are going to flock to KJ Osborne over Addison, I prefer whoever's lower owned. I think they're both solid plays. I like KJ Osborne more just because of the amount of snaps he played compared to Addison. Obviously, that can change this week. It's a new week, but it really comes down to ownership between these two for me. I expect the Vikings to throw the ball a ton, so I prefer, getting to at least two pass catchers on the Vikings side. And it really comes down to ownership for me between those two. I prefer Osborne, but once again, just really an ownership play there. They both have upside to be the captain, but I still think I'd rather play both of them in the flex spot for me personally. Moving on to the kicker. Obviously, kickers always a very solid option on the showdown slates. They've been in an optimal lineup. There's only been two showdown slates so far, three. They've showed up in almost close to half of them. So the kickers have been doing very well. So do like them. In a game with 49-point game total, the defense don't feel great. You really need them to score a touchdown, which they have been in the past few showdown slates this year so far. But otherwise, I just don't think there's a need to go to them there. In this game total, you can if you want to be contrarian. Like if they're going to be less than 10% owned, you can definitely throw them in the flex and just hope this game is pretty low scoring and you get a defensive touchdown. Because otherwise, you're kind of screwed there. You'll probably get like 3 points out of them if it's a very high scoring game, maybe even 0. Chandler, got 3 rushing attempts, did get a target. I don't think there's a need to take a shot on him, but you can if you want to. Same thing with Oliver. Got 3 targets, only for 18 yards. Kind of the backup to TJ Hawkinson there. So really no need to take a shot on these guys. You can take a shot on like Ham, like maybe they get, a red zone carry, maybe they get a touchdown still. Even then, I don't know if they'll be enough they'll probably need close to 8-9 points, depending on the slate. But yeah, I don't think it's enough to get to them there. And that's it for the Minnesota side. Moving on to the Philadelphia side. So for Philadelphia, as we can see here, Kenneth Gainwell actually was kind of the main bell cow back, which surprised a lot of people. A lot of people thought it was going to be Swift, but Swift did have some like rib issues, so they kind of were limited him a little bit. So Gainwell 62%. I can't even talk. 62% of the snaps. Swift 29% of them. And Boston Scott 12%. In terms of wide receivers, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, obviously clear 1, 2 number 1, number 2, however you want to label them there. And then for the third wide receiver spot, they did spread out a tad bit. Quez Watkins was wide receiver 3. Did play a little bit of Zacchaeus there. Tight end situation, 92% for Dallas Goedert. Stoll did play 20%. So they did run some double tight end sets. And then in terms of team targets, Gainwell got 4, Swift 2, Scott 1. For the wide receivers, 10 to both A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Quez got 2. And then tight ends, 1 for Dallas Goedert. So Dallas Goedert was not involved at all in that last game. And that's one of the things I want to mention is Nick Sirianni did come out and say that they are going to get Dallas Goedert involved. He's a coach that usually says that. He said that about Swift and Goddard, and he's one of those coaches. If you're not following him, I'll retweet them on my Twitter. But I found a Twitter page that is dedicated to tracking what coaches say about a player going into the week and how they perform based on what the coach said, and kind of giving them a percentage of like this coach is usually 70% right when he says, "Oh, we're going to get this guy involved," and the guy actually gets involved. So with that in mind, I do really like Goddard and Swift as bounce back candidates. Obviously, Kenneth Gainwell is out, so that means a lot more people are going to be on DeAndre Swift. So we'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of the Philadelphia side, Jalen Hurts is a quarterback that obviously is a great flex play, great captain play. He's a guy you can put in your captain spot. You don't really need any of his pass catchers. Reason why is he's a massive, massive upside when it comes to rushing the ball. He can go for 50, 100 plus rushing yards, a few rushing touchdowns. If that happens, obviously it's taken away touchdown equity from his other players, and he can just get there alone on his rushing abilities. Plus, if you add in a touchdown or two from throwing the ball, it's clear he doesn't need any of his pass catchers, but you can if you want to. You just really hope he doesn't go off rushing, and you really hope he doesn't get in the red zone touchdowns, any QB sneaks, because they do love doing that in the red zone there. So that's the only downside to playing him in the captain is that if you do play some of his pass catchers, you really just hope he doesn't go for any of those QB sneaks. But yeah, I love Jalen Hurts right now, prefer him in the flex, but still a great captain option, whether that's playing with his receivers, pass catchers, just like I mentioned with the Viking side, pair him with every single one of his receivers, even the running back, where to go, Swift. You can do that. Get the Goddard, and as I said, wide receivers, tight ends, and you can pair him with the kicker as well. So that's the Hurts breakdown. For the rest of the team, Brown, Smith, pretty much going to play every single snap. It really comes down to ownership between the two of them. I mean, they're going to see, once again, close to 10 targets each, unless one of them has a very bad off game. I prefer getting to Brown. He's just a little bit more consistent in terms of his, I'd say, targets compared to a guy like Smith. But still, they're both electric, both great captain plays. If you're not going to put them in the captain, I'd put one of them in the flex just because they're heavily involved in this offense. Gainwell obviously out, so that's going to open up the door to a guy like DeAndre Swift, who's way too cheap here. So he's probably going to be massive, massive chalk at 4,000. It's a shame, DK can't up his price tag, because at that price, it's going to be really hard not to play him, at least in the flex, because that's super cheap for a guy who's going to split the backfield with Boston Scott. But once again, if everyone's going to go to Swift there at 4,000 and Boston Scott's going to be a fraction of the ownership, Boston Scott will probably play 30% of the snaps, maybe more, depending if they still want to kind of ease DeAndre Swift into it. So keep that in mind. The ownership there with Swift and Boston Scott is going to be key. I think Penny is still on the IR. Oh, he'll be active. So that does kind of open up some questions. So once again, if Swift's going to be extremely, extremely chalk, I don't mind taking a shot on Boston Scott or even Rashad Penny, because they do like to use multiple running backs. So keep that in mind there with the Swift information. Even though he's very cheap, you can definitely make a case to fade him depending on the ownership there. As I mentioned, Goddard, I really, really like the tight ends. This is a game where both tight ends on both sides should be heavily involved. I know Goddard wasn't in that last week, but Nick Sirianni said they will get him heavily involved in this game. So I really like him as well there. So I think either one is just a great captain play. Right now, as I said, I'm going to put TJ Hawkinson in there, but I think either one is a great captain play. They both have huge, huge upside. There is, tight ends who are heavily involved in the pass catching game there. So really like both of them as of right now. Defense, you can definitely go there. As I mentioned, same thing with the Vikings side. You really hope this game is very low scoring, or one of them gets a defensive touchdown to be worth it. Otherwise, it's going to screw you over. Elliott, really like him. I prefer him to the Vikings kicker, just because, the Eagles do score a ton of points. So do really like Jake Elliott. He's a very good kicker as well. Quez Watkins is going to be more of your contrarian dart throw play. Should play, 70% of the snaps, not heavily involved, but he could go for a huge touchdown, and that's really all you need to set yourself apart from the field in a 196,000 entry contest. Is for a guy like Quez Watkins, super cheap, not heavily involved. Only $1,000 cheaper than Swift. So people are probably going to be scared of that price tag. They'd rather pay the $1,000 up for Swift or even pay down for guys like Scott and Penny. So he's kind of in a lone man range or a no man's land there at that price tag, which should keep people away. So I don't mind taking a dart throw if you want to play risky and get different for your lineup. You can definitely look to him there because otherwise there's really not like a guy to get different with unless it's going to be one of these running backs like a Scott or Penny. Because on the Minnesota side, everything is kind of clear. The only people to really take a shot on would be Chandler, Oliver, or Ham, and it's just gross going to them because they're just not involved at all. At least, Quez Watkins will see 70% of the targets. Let's say Brown or Smith get hurt or they just have a bad game. Quez Watkins could, be filling that void there alongside like a Goddard. So I do have some interest in him as of right now. As I mentioned, Scott Penny really comes down to ownership for Swift. If everyone's just going to flock to Swift, I don't mind taking a shot on Scott or Penny, based on their ownership. And that's really it. As I said, Zacharias played a little bit, but a few snaps, not much there, and that's it. So to fill out this, rest of this lineup here, going to be hard not to get to at least one quarterback. So with Hawkinson in the captain spot, um, I do think I'd rather go to Madison there and then pair AJ Brown. Excuse me, not AJ Brown. Jalen Hurts, pair with Goddard, and then 7,500 left over. I don't mind getting to Swift there. 11,000 left over. You can get to an AJ Brown. So it's kind of an Eagles stack there. 4 Eagles, 2 Vikings. I wouldn't say it's the most optimal with that, but it's kind of how I like to start off with my lineup builds, kind of see who I can pay up for, who I can take out. But right now, the core plays for me are probably going to be Hawkinson, Goddard, and I'd say Madison. As of right now, these are going to be my 3 core plays. As I said, right now, really like Hawkinson as my captain play. That might change. Hopefully, we get some more news out of that Philadelphia running back situation there in that room, because that'd really help in terms of like who I want to target from the running backs on the Philadelphia side. So that's my breakdown for tomorrow night's game. Hope you guys liked the video. I will have a PrizePicks video out for this following this video, so make sure to check that out. Check out my Patreon link down below. I'll have a whole write up for this slate tomorrow. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Peace.